Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making a fresh roasted tomato basil soup. Today's recipe is for all of those who have asked me for a way to make tomato soup using fresh tomatoes. My original recipe, which I love, is great for the winter time, but it uses canned tomatoes. So today we are going to be using those vine-ripened garden tomatoes and roasting them up for best flavor. Today's recipe takes a little bit of time in the oven because we obviously have to roast our veggies, which is going to give them the best possible flavor. But overall, it's a really simple recipe with simple ingredients, and it has an incredible flavor. So let's get started. Get your oven preheating to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. We want it nice and hot. And let's talk about our tomatoes. So for today's recipe, we are going to need 3 pounds of tomatoes. Roma or plum tomatoes will work really well. I am using these vine-ripened tomatoes, which I totally grew myself in my garden. I did not grow a garden this year. I grew a baby this year, and I am not capable of both, evidently. But the important thing to note is that they should be nice, juicy, red, flavorful tomatoes. If you're gonna do this with waxy, pale grocery store tomatoes, your soup's just not gonna taste as good, unfortunately. All right, so your oven's preheating. Grab yourself a baking pan. I've lined mine with parchment paper, which I recommend, and we're going to start cutting up these tomatoes. So I'm just going to cut these in half. We'll arrange them on our baking tray, cut side up. Okay, but that's not all we're going to roast. You'll want a sweet onion. This is a large sweet onion. You could use a yellow onion, but I really prefer sweet here. Shocker. Oh, what was I gonna do with this one? Just leave it there. Peel off this outer layer. And we're just going to cut this into really thick wedges. Let's arrange these on the baking tray as well. Just squeeze them in there. And then we're going to drizzle everything with a little bit of olive oil. What do you think of that, Luke?
Like it.
Like it? And then I'm just going to sprinkle this with some kosher salt. I use about a teaspoon of kosher salt for the tomatoes and onion. And I also like to do some freshly cracked black pepper, not too much. And then this is going into our oven, center rack, 425 degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. And it is going to need to bake, I usually say about 45 to 60 minutes. Smaller tomatoes, less time, obviously larger tomatoes, more. I'll show you what they look like when they're finished. While those tomatoes are roasting, we can go ahead and prep our garlic. I choose to mince my garlic and cook it separately rather than roasting it. I think it's just easier this way. So if I could just get the bulb open. See this is a monstrous clove of garlic. This is why I say a tablespoon of garlic instead of 5 cloves. You have a lot of variation in garlic size. And we'll mince this right up. It's already becoming clear to me that this is going to be more than a tablespoon of garlic, but we're gonna use that anyway. You can always do more garlic, just don't ever do less garlic. We have our, we'll call it a heaping tablespoon of garlic. And then there are a couple other things that you can prep while your tomatoes are roasting. I've measured out my chicken broth. This is 2.5 cups of chicken broth. And we're also going to need, I like to use a sprig of fresh thyme. I will include a note if you want to use dried thyme, but fresh is really the way to go. And we're also going to need a 1/2 cup of fresh basil. So you can either just coarsely chop this or you can tear it. I'm just going to go ahead and prep that now. Just need to get a little bit more of my homegrown basil here. Grew it myself in my garden, obviously. But really you do want to use fresh basil. After all, this is a very fresh tasting soup, and fresh basil goes a long way. I don't need the stems in there. A lot of fresh basil. I'll tell you one thing I don't like, and maybe this makes me uncultured, but I don't like basil in my desserts. I had a cheesecake the other day, had basil in it. I was not a fan. All right, let's check on those tomatoes. All right, with our tomatoes cooked, we're going to head over to the stovetop. You're going to want to use a large pot or a Dutch oven for this. Key here is it needs to be non-reactive. So I'm using a cast iron, but it's an enameled cast iron. Regular cast iron could end up bringing out the acidity in your tomatoes and making your soup taste tinny and metallic. So something non-reactive. Stainless steel would also work fine. So what I'm gonna do here is I'll turn my stovetop heat to medium, and I'm going to add a tablespoon of butter into the pot, salted or unsalted, either's fine. Let's get nice and melty. Once that's nice and melty, we'll add our garlic and cook this until it's nice and fragrant. It takes like 30 to 60 seconds. I did hold back a little on the garlic. I didn't want it to totally dominate the tomato flavor. Garlic's nice and fragrant. Let's grab our tomatoes. We're going to add them carefully into the pot with our onion. And you can put any juices in there as well, please. I'm so excited to eat this. Veggies should be super soft and tender here. No onion left behind. My pan's not really that hot anymore. All those juices in there. Oh yeah. All right, give everything a nice stir. And we're going to add our chicken broth. Go ahead and pour this in, 2.5 cups. I think I mentioned that earlier. All right, let's add our basil. Just gonna stir that in a little bit. And we are going to puree this soup until it's nice and smooth. I am going to use one of my favorite kitchen gadgets. This is my immersion blender. It makes such easy work of stuff like this. I use it for my potato soup as well. But if you don't have one, you can puree this in batches in a, I can't remember what it's called, a blender. A blender, you can use a blender. You wanna do this until it's all nice and smooth. All right, once this is nice and smooth, we're going to add a nice little bunch of thyme here. Drop that in. And I also highly recommend adding some cream. It mellows out the flavor in a really nice way. This is a 1/4 cup of cream. So I'm gonna stir this in. And then I have a secret ingredient that I've used before in my other tomato soup. This is optional. We're going to add a little bit of baking soda to the soup. So what this does is it takes away a lot of the bite of the acidity. It really gives the soup such a nice depth of flavor. I really, really like it. If you want a brighter, more tart flavor, you can omit this, but I don't know. I had all of my taste testers test it and everyone liked it better with the baking soda. Go ahead and stir that in. And then here's where you're going to want to taste test. And if it needs any more salt or any more pepper, then you can add that here now as well. Also, if the tomatoes still seem a little bit tart, you could add a little bit of sugar, but I've never really needed to add the sugar. A little bit more salt, just a little. It's so good. All right, so for best flavor, you're going to want to let this simmer for about 30 minutes or so. It's just going to develop the flavor a little bit more. Remove the thyme just before serving, and then enjoy. Now, if you're watching this video and you're bummed because you don't have any fresh vine-ripened tomatoes, make sure to check out my classic tomato soup. I use just canned tomatoes. It's pretty amazing. You will love that one. All right, let's go ahead and try this. I'm so excited to eat this. Pouring it backwards, so it looks nice on camera, hopefully. All you need is a nice grilled cheese to go with this. I top mine with a little bit of Parmesan cheese, a couple of sourdough croutons, a little basil, just for show. All right, this is hot. We'll try it in a second, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. It's hot. I've never had much patience for this. Oh, I need one of those croutons. That cheese. I think you can see the steam coming off of it. That was a good soup. You gonna eat some of my tomato soup?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't like tomatoes.
You think Rhett will eat it?
Yeah. I like tomatoes.
That's true, you do.
I like tomatoes.
I know you do. Oops, watch your salt.